Hi internet, I know, I look fabulous today and you're just gonna get a wide shot because I am too tired and too lazy to alternate the shots by myself today. The plan is as well that I want to make my cape, which I'll take a picture and I'll put up the actual thing from the pattern, but it is a cape with sleeves. Think Galadriel in Lord of the Rings. Oh my god, I should have a TV in here and watch Lord of the Rings. No, Cassie? No. Pretty much I've got all the pattern here. I've got 3 different fabrics that I'm going to use. This is for the outer layer. I'm not sure which of these I'm putting inside. I'm going to come to that in a bit. But first I want to go through, cut out all the fabric pieces for pattern B and get this thing started. I think I have enough fabric. I just don't know. I'm going to have my tuffet already here with needles in it and my scissors ready to go because this isn't a quilting video. Okay, now it does have the desired way to cut your fabric out, if it's selvage or not and how wide it is. I have to work out how wide it is, if it's a 115 or a 150 centimeter, which is a 45 or 60 inch length of fabric, and I'll just watch YouTube and cut out my pattern, shall I? I already have the matching cotton as well. Hey internet, while editing and recording this video, I found out I'm gonna have to do a voiceover because I didn't talk a lot and the bits that I did talk in were kind of unnecessary. It just edited better together if I fast forward through it all and talk to you through it. I ended up having a 60-inch wide fabric for the outer layer, or the crushed velvet. Cutting the tissue paper ended up being a real pain in my butt because I had holes through the layers. It ended up as a small hole at the start. It's almost like water got through to it and ate it away. It was a larger hole by the end of it, and it just meant that the tissue paper stuck together as I was trying to unfold it, and there was that hole in it, but it wasn't a big drama. My original plan for cutting out this was to pin it all together, then cut it out to make sure I had enough fabric. I had enough fabric anyway, so it didn't matter. I shouldn't have done that. But I didn't do that because it felt like a huge waste of time. With the hood, I made a boo-boo when I cut it out on the actual pattern, and I left like a good couple of inches there. I don't know why. I fixed it up when it came to the lining and I realigned everything when it came to the hood. It was just something that I did for some stupid reason. The thing that did annoy me about this pattern was for the large pieces, which were the side panels and the back panels, it came in 2 parts and I had to stick them together in the middle, which you can see here. I just felt like it was an unnecessary step. I've never had to do that with any other pattern. Generally it just comes on the larger piece of tissue. I don't know if it was a money saving thing or what, but it was annoying to cut out an extra bit only to attach it to the other bit. It did have circles all the way along so that you knew it was lined up correctly, but still it was annoying. The other thing I found was I had to cut along the selvage because for some reason there was an extra inch after the little holes where the needle sort of sat, where the selvage had rolled itself up, and it kept pulling and distorting the fabric. I made sure to pin the fabric's front faces together and pin the pattern on top, just so I always knew which piece was what, which backfired on me on the end because I detached a couple of them and that sucked, but I could line it back up. I did roughly follow the pattern guide for how to cut out the fabric, but I also didn't care too much. I just did it so that the grain was right and it was lining up. It really would have helped if the table was just
6 inches wider because I constantly had length hanging over, and if it was a little bit longer as well, although I wouldn't have been able to move around it. The issue I was having at the start as well was for some reason my scissors were a little bit loose, so they weren't closing properly at the end while I was cutting. That ended up getting fixed later on by my dad, but it was still a pain. I found that having the 2 tuffets were really handy because they're both fairly weighty, and it stopped all the fabric from being pulled off the table. On this piece, I realised that up at the shoulder it actually has a seam for you to cut away if you're using pattern B instead of pattern A. So that's another downside to it, that if it just had the one seam, I could keep both patterns, but because I have to cut it away, I lose that pattern. You can reattach it if you want to, I just think it's a pain in the butt, really. The good thing about the crushed velvet was I didn't feel like I had to have it ironed. I just decided to double up the fabric and cut the hood once when it came to this step, because the hood is the smallest part and it wasn't going to make a difference anyway because you have to place them side by side. For all the other pieces, the actual size of the pattern was too big for me to double up the fabric anyway, which was just annoying. I also decided while I was making this that instead of just lining the sleeves and the hood as the paper had shown, or the instructions had shown, I was going to line the entire cape. It meant a little bit of extra work, especially cutting, but of course the lining was a lot easier to cut than the crushed velvet. And you can see there, just running at my scissors is a lot easier because this is where they had been fixed. Not that you can see, but I did have to constantly flip over the piece of paper just because that's what the pattern said to do, so that you can obviously get both sides. I didn't mark all the different niches and stuff that needed to be lined up, which was probably a mistake. But again, I'm not used to cutting out patterns for fabric or for clothing, so I just didn't think about it. Also, it wasn't too needed because wherever that was, there was a piece, a corner or something that I could line it up with. As I'm going through everything, I'm attaching the lining to the satin and the actual paper piece. I did have to go through and iron my lining fabric though, because it did get a bit wrinkly. And a couple of times I did actually iron the patterns, although you can't really see it anyway. Oh, I didn't end up recording all of the lining being cut. I think I missed out some of the crushed velvet as well, just because it was boring. When it came to sewing them together, because I had the right size together most of the time, I didn't really bother with pinning them because it was just a lot of straight seams. I did go through and sew the lining together first with a light cotton that matched it, thanks to quilting. I think I did end up pinning the armholes just because I had to start and stop at certain points, and it was a bit more than just a straight seam. There's not really much to say with this part. I end up sewing the sides and the back together and pinning them, then I sewed the sleeves together. Really, I should have sewed the sleeves into place with the outer part of the cape before attaching it to the rest of the lining, because it just, later on I regretted it. But we make mistakes, and when you change patterns you need to learn from these mistakes. With the crushed velvet, it was fairly easy to sew through. I did use pins here and there just because it moved a bit. but it wasn't too tricky. I hated cutting the crushed velvet, but it wasn't terrible for running through the sewing machine. I should have used a stretch stitch, especially on the longer seams. I didn't. Once again, you live and you learn. It's not a really big deal. It just, I have the option there, I should have done it. I mean, when it came to the crushed velvet, I did a bit more of just sewing the pieces together before I sewed the entire thing together. That was because I've already sewn the other bit together. I don't know what I cut off there, but it was something with the sleeves that wasn't lining up. This is where I realized that that sleeve was not working at all, and I had to cut a new sleeve. I don't know what I did on that sleeve, but it sucked. That's where I was happy I had the extra length. I kind of wanted to make it skirt with the extra length, but I can always go back and buy more fabric anyway. This one a lot easier. I realized that I forgot to check which side of the pattern I was meant to be using, but I guessed the right one, thankfully, otherwise I would have been really up poop creek. So this is where I start to attach everything to other seams, I believe. The cool part with the shoulder seams on this is that the front and back pieces, or side and front panels, don't meet at the shoulders. They meet on the actual sleeve, so you've got about 2 inches there, and it looks pleasant. It makes it fit that little bit better, and it was easier to sew. This is just me trying on the inside and the outside together without the hood to see how it worked. I sewed the front 2 seams together just to get that started. I didn't really use pins, I just fed it through and hoped for the best. The fronts lined up pretty well apart from the extra length in the velvet, but otherwise it was fine. At this part I'm securing the sleeves, the lining and the external, but when I pulled this out, which you might get to see, it made tubes and it didn't work. It turned into a knotted mess for some reason. I couldn't turn it out, which is why I decided to go with a bias. This is an old Halloween shirt that I decided to wear for the spirit of Halloween. Already seam ripped the sleeves so that they won't attach there anymore. Here you can see me attaching the hood. First I sewed the 2 parts of the hood together, and then I just attached them to themselves. I attached the crushed velvet to the crushed velvet and the lining to the lining, and then I went through while they were inside out and I re-sewed just to reinforce the 2 seams together. So really, if I want to like work on that hood again, I'm gonna have to undo that stitching and redo it. I'm just hanging it on my dress form on the table because my dress form is really short compared to me. So I put it on the table so I could get the full length and ended up trimming the fabric so that I got an even hem. What you can't see is that I'm sitting on the ground at the corner there, getting it all nice and straight. Because the lining was pretty exact, it was a really easy guide to go off. And this is where I sewed the hem together. On the actual pattern, because you don't have the internal lining, it just says to do a 5/8 hem rolled up. Just flip it up and do a 5/8 hem. Being because I was sewing them together, I think it kind of was the same thing. This is me playing with it, making sure everything's turned out right. And this is me attaching the bias. In between these two shots, I had gone and overlocked every seam, which you didn't get to see. I decided to overlock after. I don't like overlocking. Overlocking and I hate each other, but also just to stop everything from fraying and to keep it nice and neat. It worked out well. I think I ended up getting most things down to a 1/4 inch seam, which is what I'm comfortable with anyway. Here I've just done the bias as I would do bias in quilting, and then I have secured the sleeves together all the way around, and I've gone through and I've sewn the raw edges of the bias down facing the edge of the sleeves, and then later I go through, turn them and hand sew them so that you have an inch either side. I believe I ended up cutting 6 inches. I just used my rotary cutter and rulers to cut the bias because again, it's something that I'm comfortable with in quilting, and if I don't have to use scissors, why would I use scissors? I did find the sleeves a little bit tricky though because I had to feed them together. On one of them, the lining was a little bit bigger. On the other one, the crushed velvet was a little bit bigger. Here's me just modeling it before I top stitch on the hood. For the top stitch on the hood, I kept the lighter cotton in my bobbin and I used the darker cotton on top just so you don't really get to see it either side. And this is just me top stitching the hood so it sits a little bit flatter and nicer rather than bulging up.
Yes, Frodo, I believe it's just right up ahead. Oh, there you are. As you can see, it's done. It is so done. I am so happy that I had to get my staff out. This is probably the only position that I could get you where you could see a full view of me without me going outside. But this is the cape. All said and done on this real awkward angle. I'm also very tall. Look, it's like, I feel like Gandalf the Purple. I feel like I'm Minerva McGonagall and I'm about to school some Slytherins. Why? Because I like Slytherin, I am a Slytherin. Why would I school the Gryffindors? Fuck the Gryffindors. I don't care that Minerva's a Gryffindor. I do kind of want a black one with green on the inside, but I also never want to work with crushed velvet again, and also plan to work with crushed velvet again. I'm pretty sure it ended up being the exact length and size that the pattern dictated, because the few times that I went to change things, apart from the lining, it just ended up not working out, or I forgot that I was cutting an extra couple of inches on the end, and then I did on 2 pieces but not the other 2 pieces. Anyway, it's perfect. It reaches the floor. It looks dapper as fuck. These sleeves are amazing. If I had have followed the actual paper and not done the lining, it would have been so much easier to do the sleeves, and I should have attached the sleeves first, the lining and the outlining, before attaching the sleeves to the rest of the lining, and I didn't. So this is what I'm living with. I haven't finished sewing the actual bias all the way around because I'm lazy. I want to get this video out and I don't know when I will. Let's face it, it's my cloak. I'm going to use it the way I want, and one day I'll work out how I want to finish it properly, / sit there and do hand work all the way around so that the bias looks like this, or like this teeny bit here, or I'll give up and do it by machine. I haven't decided yet. I'd like to recreate this lovely purple skirt out of this crushed velvet, but I don't know if that's going to happen. I did end up top stitching the hood. I don't know if I showed that in the video, which has made it sit a lot flatter because when it wasn't top stitched it was kind of like bulging. I am considering also top stitching the front panel, but at the same time I kind of like how loosey-goosey it is. What do you guys think? Do you think I should top stitch here,
I'll leave it as it is. Also in the pattern it did have ties here, but it just sits here. My boyfriend calls it a boxing robe. I think of it more of like a Galadriel the purple, Gandalf the purple. I'm just a really extra teacher at Hogwarts. I like a lot of fandoms, okay? A lot of. But I think you can see how it all falls. And now it seems to be fine. The only thing I noticed is if you pull the back seam apart too far, you can see kind of where the seam is and where it wrinkles on the side. I'll see if I can show you. The only way I could do that would be using a stretch seam or by using an elastic cotton, because no matter what, this velvet is going to fall and there's no way to avoid it really, apart from doing a stretch stitch or something like that. I didn't want to unpick a lot of things. I did have to unpick a little bit. Overall, I love this pattern. I don't mind the paper pattern. The sizing worked out fine. I kind of wouldn't mind doing it again, but more of a tailored silhouette than just this big boxy silhouette. But this is perfect for like sitting at my desk and writing, running around and just having everyday cosplay, because who doesn't do everyday cosplay? God. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed watching me sew this and follow the pattern. Let me know if you've ever tried to create a cape for someone or yourself. If I can make a suggestion, do it for a very small child so you don't have to cut out as much. Adults, it sucks, but it was also cheaper than buying a cape already made. So yeah, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye! Where's my sword and my stuff? I need them both. Here's my stuff. I'm going on an adventure! I really need a fan in here. It's turning into summer.